She and her daughter Charlotte really changed the world as it relates to understanding CBD. And Paige now has committed her life to making sure that access is available for everyone who needs it. Welcome to the Produce Moms. This is the podcast where I talk to various people who've made an impact on the fruit and vegetable community. There are so many stories to share that will change the way you look at fresh produce. Paige Figi, we are so glad you're here.
Thank you so much, Lori. Yeah, thanks for having me. It's an honor. It's been great to meet you, and I'm always happy to talk about CBD.
No one knows it better than you, and your story is what inspired me. Attending Natural Products Expo and seeing the Charlotte's Web booth, understanding how their namesake for that business is your daughter, and just becoming more familiar with your family story and watching the documentary myself that aired on CNN. So let's start with an intro for people who aren't familiar with your story, help people understand how CBD changed your life.
Sure. Yeah, it's interesting about that documentary too on CNN. I think they're doing 9 of them. There's 9 planned. I forget what number they're on now, but I'm going to be my walker, like an old lady when they're still filming these. So my story started with my daughter, Charlotte, back in 2010. This is 13 years ago. And she has epilepsy. We were at the end of our medical road. We had tried every drug and nothing worked to stop her seizure. She has a really catastrophic, untreatable type of epilepsy. Of course, you try to treat it. You try every drug. We had dozens of drugs that didn't work. A couple we tried multiple times. I live in Colorado. And so at the time, we were really looking outside the box to try crazy stuff, diets, ketogenic diet, and all kinds of things. So it wasn't that outrageous to try to go into this realm that is what we're here to talk about today, was CBD. I started calling researchers in Israel when I found they were doing studies where it was legal with a hemp extract. This is before we called it CBD. It's cannabidiol. It's a part of the hemp plant. And there's thousands of things in this plant. And they were studying mice with epilepsy and finding it was an anticonvulsant. So it stopped these mice from seizing. And there were people in France and Brazil as well. And so I hired translators. I'm on the phone with these people trying to get anything I can get, all of their information. They shared it with me. They shared their dosing. They shared their data. And I thought, well, I live in Colorado. How hard? This can't be that hard to figure out. We were at the time in 2010, a medical marijuana state. So we didn't have hemp, we didn't have recreational. And so I was doing this under a medical marijuana regulatory system. No child had ever used it, but someone had wrote pediatrics into the state bill, and no child was using it for epilepsy. So it was a difficult road back then to get her doctors, the state attorney general, the governor, everyone on board to allow her to try this. At the time, just to give you the what I was dealing with day to day, Charlotte was 4 years old and she was unconscious. She was on life support and the hospital had nothing left to try. So they sent her home and she was in hospice at home, do not resuscitate. Our house was basically like an ICU with just full of equipment. And she couldn't swallow. She couldn't breathe room air. I mean, she didn't have much time. Yeah, she was 4 and she was, they thought probably weeks, months left to live. And so of course I'm like rapidly trying to figure something out for her. I knew whatever I found next wasn't going to work for her. She had run out of time medically. She was at the end of her life. But I thought, I got to do something. I can't just sit here and watch my kid die. And maybe this information can help someone else, some other kid. So I started looking into creating this. Of course, in the state at the time, it was just medical. And I even back then, it was really just under the guise of medical. It was recreational. People were getting red cards and using it for recreational purposes. And I wasn't hearing from a lot of the medical patients, probably because it was working for them, the medical marijuana, and they weren't loud about it. But we were seeing a lot of abuse, like recreational abuse of this medical law. And people were just breeding plants to get the THC higher, and no one had ever heard of cannabidiol. They weren't growing these plants for these other medical potential in them. And so, it took a long, long time. I called everybody in the industry and no one knew what I was talking about. I was looking for a high level of cannabidiol and a very, very low level of THC, hemp, basically. And it didn't exist. And so I was just, this is during the time I'm watching her seize. Her seizures were every 30 minutes. She would have a massive seizure, a tonic-clonic, or a grand mal seizure. And the seizure was about 29 minutes long. So she'd have a seizure, she'd stop, recover for 1 minute, and then start over. So she was just not conscious, not talking, not breathing, not walking, nothing, not eating, not swallowing. And so it was like an urgent, rapid thing. It was a desperate time. And I don't know how I did it, but it's like that fighting mom. I don't know if you have kids, Lori, but it was like that mom spirit, like nothing stands in your way. It's not even like a choice to be courageous. You get out of my way. Let me figure this out. I know this exists. These researchers are saying this is the next anticonvulsant. And I just went about trying to figure this out. And I found people to make the plant, who are breeding the plant. And they made this, extracted this so I could give it to my kid. And of course, like I said, this wasn't going to work for her because it's like tree bark extract. It's like nothing. It's benign. It didn't have a high. It was non-intoxicating because the THC was so low that it was considered hemp. It was below 0.3% THC. And just massive levels of cannabidiol or CBD. And so we formulated this and tested. I had a very strict set of criteria that I asked these brothers, the Stanley brothers, if you're familiar with the Stanley family, that's who stepped in to help her. And it was scary for them, I'm sure, because no one was doing this for a kid. I'm like, look, she's kind of the perfect guinea pig, if you will, because she's going to die anyway. She's having so many seizures. It'll be very obvious if it's making it worse or making it better. It'll be very, very obvious, or doing nothing. So this is a good way to test this out. The brothers at the time were operating a medical marijuana business.
Paige, from your and I's previous discussions, we need to kind of just go through the terminology here, because you have marijuana, hemp, CBD, THC. Any other key terms that you need to, identify for folks? Because I think that's really critical.
I think that it gets confusing. I think people conflate the issue of cannabis and marijuana, those words, and what you agree it's called, and it should be called cannabis, but that's for recreational and medical reasons. But what I'm working on, and what I was giving my daughter, and what I'm still working on today is hemp. Is under the regulations of hemp. So it's very different. And now even there are pharmaceuticals. There's a whole pharmaceutical lane that exists because this is an anticonvulsant. So this is a very separate issue. It's not pharma. It's not cannabis. It's a hemp issue. And the extract of CBD can come from all the different types of plants, but it comes from hemp generally, people who are selling and extracting and making these products.
Thank you for that clarity. So the Stanley family worked with you. They were cultivating or growing this hemp plant that met the criteria that you had, because one of your top criteria, you didn't want hallucinogenic effects on your daughter. You wanted just the CBD components.
Well, that was what the research showed. I had access to it. I wasn't worried about the intoxicating part. It was, the drugs this kid was on, phenobarbital. These were benzodiazepine. These are opiates. She's taking. She's intoxicated on drugs. In fact, she was intoxicated to the point of being in a medical coma because she was seizing so much. So that wasn't really my concern. I really didn't expect this to work because it was so non-intoxicating. So it's kind of like I wasn't worried about her getting high, that she was high for 4 years on medication. So it was just that the data coming out of Israel was that the CBD, it didn't need to be to that level. And in fact, for Charlotte, THC over a certain threshold caused her seizures to increase. And so for some people, it works to stop seizures. And for some people, THC can work to make them worse. And for her, she's just so sensitive that it actually increased her seizures. So I quickly found out what ratio and milligrams I needed of each. And I knew I couldn't go above this milligram of THC. So it was quite clear what I needed. And then the brothers made that. They were breeding this and messing around. They were growing hemp and breeding hemp in a medical marijuana greenhouse, because you can't grow this outside back in 2010. This is just medical marijuana. So it's very strict regulations there. It's like you're making apple juice and you're growing your apple trees in a small little room and you're trying to sell an apple juice company. It was outrageous. This is this safe little benign, non-intoxicating plant. But they did have exactly what I was looking for, and they agreed to my 9 very strict rigid, expensive criteria of how I wanted to go through this for her. And they went forward and made enough for her. And of course I couldn't run out. I didn't expect it to work, but I couldn't run out. So they had to make sure we had enough. It had to be reproducible. It had to be exactly what I needed for her. I put it in her feeding tube because she couldn't swallow. She had a surgical feeding tube, and she stopped seizing right from the first dose. Her seizures stopped. And it was like, hold on a second, this is, I had to think about 100 other Charlottes have that same response or a similar response till I really believed it, because it's like a health product. It's like a supplement we take.
That's where your spine chills when you hear this part of your story. After the first dose, your daughter had immediate relief from the seizures.
Yeah, it was outrageous to witness. This is a kid that nothing stopped her epilepsy. And I really had given up the thought. We didn't use the word hope, and I'm a realist, and it was quite shocking to see this extract of a plant, this essence of a plant work and so effectively. And my first thought when obviously this is working, my first thought was anger. Like, how did I have to figure this out? I'm a mother. I should just be doing what I do best. And it was quite outrageous. And that it spoke to the cultural stigma against the plant, right? We're a military family. I was a special forces wife at the time. And, we were conservative. And it just really spoke to how afraid the whole war on drugs and all those decades of prohibition against cannabis, it really sticks in your mind, and we assume this is a dangerous thing. And so there's no research allowed because it's a Schedule 1 substance. And I have to figure this out in my house with a bunch of random strangers. And it was quite maddening. Like, I was angry actually for a while.
I'm sure. So we're going to take a brief break. And then when we come back, I want to learn more about how Charlotte's medical team responded to what you experienced after that first dose in her feeding tube. Folks, stay with us. Very special episode today on the Produce Moms podcast. The Produce Moms is proud to be the first and currently only B Corp certified influencer brand in the world. What does this mean? It means we view our work as a force for good, a good for the community, a good for our employees, for all of our stakeholders and the environment. Your participation in the Produce Moms community empowers all that we do. Please send me an email if you have any feedback or suggestions for this show or the Produce Moms brand overall. I believe that together we can get more fruits and vegetables on every table and make the world a better place. Welcome back, everyone. This is the Produce Moms podcast, Lori Taylor and Paige Figi. All right, before the break, Paige was telling us one of the most heartwarming, spine-tingling stories I've ever heard, and that is the story of how she, through her mother intuition and her intense, I have to find a way to improve my daughter's life and the lives of other people who are going through this, truly just had a miraculous response and into the seizures that were dominating her daughter Charlotte's life through CBD. So how did the medical team respond? Because I can't imagine that they were super supportive with what you were doing.
No, they weren't. And they're scientists, and I do understand that they have to take that lane and look at this scientifically. This isn't science. This is one anecdotal case. I myself barely believed what I was seeing, and and I think I respect them and I respect their practice and what they were doing, but I would have appreciated more support. And actually what happened down the road, and I'm going to jump ahead here, but I would go speak at Epilepsy Foundation organizational, events and that sort of thing, or neurological conferences, and just explain the story and explain my work with the regulatory stuff. And they sent my doctor, the children's hospital sent my doctor on these same speaking engagements to speak after me against CBD. And we're in a litigious country, so they're worried about lawsuits, and they have to be very cautious and careful. And we did need research, but had I not done that, my kid wouldn't have had that experience, and then other people would have had. I understand their point of view, but they came out so hard against it that it made it feel like it was a dangerous thing or a bad thing. And there's a way to do both. There's a way in the middle, like we can try things and for desperate situations where there's no other chance, and simultaneously, walk and chew gum at the same time, and simultaneously do research and do studies and start drugs, but allow people who really needs an option to try these things before their drug manufacturers get on board with it. But yeah, so her doctors were not thrilled. And then what happened after that, because it would have been a cool story, right? Except I vowed that no one else would have to go through what I went through to figure this out. So I never stopped fighting for other people. I told the story to a doctor, Dr. Sanjay Gupta on CNN. I wanted a pragmatic medical person to tell it. I was getting asked to do media that was real pop mom, marijuana, those words and that sort of thing. I'm like, no, this isn't that. This is different. I'm not doing anything that controversial if you really dig in and look at it. I had CPS, the Child Protective Services, involved. It was out there. It was really fringe what I was doing. And I was not going to lose my child over this, because she's now succeeding and she stopped seizing. She was 99.9% seizure free. No other drugs. We removed all of her medications. We removed all of her life support, and she never went to the hospital for another hospital trip. And so this was the only thing she took every day. So I wish they had supported me more. But what I did was I told the story to a doctor, and then I waited 18 months and turned all the bad marijuana media down. And Sanjay Gupta was publicly against cannabis. He had come out and said, medical marijuana is a hoax and it's not a real thing. And I don't agree with it. So it was risky, but we wanted to tell the story. It didn't feel right to keep this information to ourselves. He came and met Charlotte and totally changed his mind. He saw my data. He saw what we were doing here, and he changed his mind. And we're still good friends to this day. And what happened when they aired that on prime time on Sunday night is people just started coming to Colorado to have access to the same extract that she was taking. They were desperate. They wanted to try it. I really didn't think, none of us thought maybe there's like 10, 50 kids like Charlotte in the country who, have nothing left to try medically. And so we were just shocked by how many people were in the same boat. It was really tragic. So they just started coming to Colorado. They got residency. They got a medical marijuana card for their child. And some of them had to come in a medical ambulance situation. They weren't just driving to Colorado. They couldn't go back home to their state. They'd be breaking multiple laws. This isn't legal in most of these states. It was Colorado, California, maybe Washington, I think at the time had legislation, but you still had to get this across the border. So once they came to Colorado to try this, they couldn't leave. They could move here, they could break the law in their state, or they could wait while we all changed the laws together. That was their choices. So I vowed to help them. What I did, because my kid's better now, she's walking, she's talking, she went to school. I'd pack her lunch box and she'd walk down the driveway and get on the school bus. That's how her life was altered. I started going back to those states that they came from. The medical hemp refugees is what the media called them. And I started going back to those states to pass a law and help them get home. And the first states were and it created this crazy patchwork of CBD laws, but the first states were very conservative states, Republican Southern states, and they were very tight laws. So they were for CBD for possession only. They were not willing to cultivate it. They didn't want medical marijuana. They were like, they can come home and they can have it here. We don't want to know how they got it here. We're not even going to ask. But because they had to break laws to get it to their state, like Utah or Georgia, for example. But they were allowed to go back home to be with their wives and husbands and that sort of thing. Their family could just, live normally, as normal as possible. We passed a lot of states really quickly. I think once we reached 26 states, we reached halfway. So more than half the country was fine with CBD in their state. With the federal government got involved and wrote a CBD federal bill. And they named it after Charlotte, my daughter, and the company, actually, they're not supposed to do that. And that was back in 2015 was the first federal bill. And so then, so things started rolling and people started taking notice that this is a legitimate thing. It's harmless and it's worthwhile. It's a worthy issue to pursue. In that time, a drug company, actually, like I mentioned, came out. I shared my data with them, my dosing information, and they came out with a pediatric epilepsy drug made from the same thing with CBD. It was really interesting. So it just validated, we were going to get arrested for this, and then now it's a pharmaceutical.
Well, I think it's safe to say you've changed the world. The regulatory side almost happened de facto or default as you were, as you realized the efficacy. But let's talk more about your modern day work. And let's also honor the fact that Charlotte had a quality of life extension that you and all of her loved ones were not expecting because of this.
I mean, I'm not an activist. I just think she deserved a dignity, a health, just to live in a healthy way. Things that we take for granted, probably a little bit, right? Every day, just having a healthy life or being able to make choices. That's all we were asking for. Those first parents that did this were not activists, and still, it's a tough life to have a special needs kid, especially a high medical special needs child. Charlotte, I have a son, she has an older brother, and then Charlotte's a twin. She has a twin sister as well. So it was like, and I homeschool. So it was just going out to a restaurant. We take things for granted on how difficult that is for people. So it was a worthwhile cause to help people, even if it's just a little bit of less suffering that a person may have. I think that's a worthwhile cause. So I still am doing that today. So 13 years later, I'm still working on reform, on federal reform and regulation for CBD, just still for CBD. And I know people are onto bigger things and trying to get cannabis legalized, medical, recreational, all of that. I'm still we're not done yet with just this one compound and this one hemp plant. And so that's what I'm still doing today.
So the Coalition for Access Now is the work where you are focusing on getting that dietary supplement legislation in place for CBD. So explain a little bit more about the Coalition for Access Now. Folks, you can visit coalitionforaccess.org to learn more. Paige, this coalition, you are the reason it exists. I
started this. It's a 501c4 way back to go to those states and change the law in those states to get these people home. And what we did was the coalition is still and was always a consumer-based organization. So the industries have their hemp industry organizations, and they push their various bills. And that's really important that the industry speaks to legislators and says, this is what we want. This is how we want it regulated. This is how much income it draws for the state or for the country. But the Coalition for Access Now is consumer-based. So I've started with kids with epilepsy and their parents. And of course, nowadays, there's 46 million Americans take a daily dose of CBD. They're self-identifies. I'm sure it's higher than that, but that's the estimate. That's who self-identifies as taking a daily dose of this from these kids that first stuck their necks out and started this. So it needs support. It needs more regulation. The first federal bill did two things. It asked for CBD to be removed from the definition of cannabis and descheduled, because remember, it's a Schedule I substance back then. And the second part of those early bills was we needed it, like you said, regulated by the FDA as a dietary supplement. This should not be a pharmaceutical only. This should not be under the umbrella of cannabis. This should be a dietary supplement. You go to the store, it's over the counter, and you can take this. It's non-intoxicating. We got the first part done in the Farm Bill in 2018. So it was descheduled. So CBD was no longer considered under the definition of marijuana and hemp. And so it has no schedule. It was legalized. So what I'm still doing today, and it reissued the bill on St. Patrick's Day, is the second half of the same thing. I've been saying I haven't changed my language, and we're not onto bigger things. I'm just still trying to get this done for these people, is to have this be regulated by the FDA as a dietary supplement through Congress, through a bill. And that bill is 1629. HR 1629 is the House bill that dropped just recently in March.
So from a grassroots action right now, anyone listening with us who's, nodding your head in agreement and feeling inspired by what Paige is sharing, HR 1629, encourage your congressmen and women to support that bill.
And you know what's crazy? I'm going to throw this little statistic out because I've heard this repeatedly I work in Washington, and when I'm in these meetings, I've heard this from everybody. If a legislator hears an issue, like they get an email, they get a letter, they get a phone call, anything in any form, if they hear from their constituents, because I know it's hard and it's boring and we are on to bigger things and we have more important problems in our life and it's hard to do, or it's intimidating, or for whatever reason, you don't know how to reach your legislator. If a legislator hears an issue 60 times, 60, this is a top of the pile, very important issue, 60. So that could be a whole state. That could be the whole state of California for a senator, or an entire district from the House member. If they get 60 phone calls or emails on an issue, that is like a very urgent, critical, top of the pile issue. And that makes me feel sad, I guess, a little bit. It's not hard to reach out, and we can make things easy. We use standardized letters and help people reach out and send this, but they really want to hear from people in their own words, and they want to hear from why people care about CBD.
Absolutely. So why is regulation important?
So regulation has always been important because now there are 4,000, I hear, brands in this space. So they're not all great. And I do care. I think we should care if we're calling this a health supplement, a dietary supplement. You should care what you're putting in your body. And it did start with very sick people, that it deeply mattered what was in the extracts. And so I think there's a lot of good players in the industry, but I just feel like we should have a safe testing requirement. We should have safety in labeling, clear labeling, and that's it, really. It's not that complicated, but that alone would get rid of the people who just jumped in to do a cash grab. Another reason hemp should be regulated as a dietary supplement is that hemp is a remediation crop. So hemp is known to suck up the toxins from the soil. They planted hemp at Chernobyl, and they planted in environmental disasters. And it's one of these, many plants do this, but it's something that cleans the soil, like the train disaster recently that we've all seen on the news. They plant this to clean the soil. And that's maybe sounds scary, but it matters how they farm it. Because if they're not careful of what's going into the plant, if they're not testing it, independently testing, not testing their own products, third-party testing, right? So that deserves to be looked at. You could have heavy metals, and you should not be putting that in your body. That's all. And the good guys are already testing their own stuff. The really good guys are already operating as dietary supplements. They don't have to. It's expensive and tedious. And like you guys are a B corporation. It's expensive, it's tedious, it's worthwhile. And, a lot of people don't even know what a B Corp, what that means and why you would do that. But it means something to you to go through those hoops to do that. And that's kind of like the testing. So if you won't do it, there's always someone who's going to come and screw things up, right, in an industry. Then the government sometimes should get involved, sometimes, to help regulate things.
Hey, everybody, you asked, we listened. So I know that you all love our dog food recipes on theproducemoms.com. Together with our brand partners at Sage Fruit, we have actually published a dog food cookbook. So visit theproducemoms.com
podcast.com/ebook, and you can download your free copy of the Dog Food Cookbook presented by the Produce Moms and Sage Fruit.
Before we transition to closing remarks, I want to make sure that we talk a little bit about your recent collaboration and support with MLB and their involvement with what you're doing. When I think of how MLB and Charlotte's Web are working together, I see it as raising awareness, but I'd love to hear in your words what that relationship means to you. And also, I got to ask you how it felt to throw out that first pitch.
Yeah, did you see? I can throw a ball. just to explain what you're saying, Lori, the Major League Baseball knows that their players are taking CBD. They know they are on opioids. They know they're injured, and they're taking CBD. They acknowledge that, they supported it, and they partnered with a company. And this company got an NSF for sports certification, which is very expensive and very difficult to get. And in order to do that, they had to test. I think they test for 400 different things. They have to be reproducible. So it's just the highest level of a product. So MLB chose that company, the only one that has NSF certification, to partner with. And then they asked me to come throughout the first pitch at the playoffs game at Yankee Stadium. And it was like, oh, it was cool. You know, I'm on the mound throwing the ball. But for me, it was much more than that. It was, the company they partner with is named after my daughter, is why they chose me to do that. It was really validating to see how far it has come from 0 people in this country using this to 46 million, and then have Major League Baseball support and back their players. They're so sure that this is useful and worthwhile. And then, you know, for me to start as a criminal, nearly to be considered this fringe criminal, doing this to go have MLB supporting this was very validating, and it just really furthered the whole work I've done up till now. So it was an honor to do that. And I'm actually going to go see them today. So,
well, and Paige, as we transition to closing remarks, you know, Charlotte is sadly no longer with us, but to your point that you shared with me, gosh, what a blessing that you were given more time with your daughter and she was able to enjoy quality of life prior to her death in 2020. But as we honor Charlotte today and every day when we think about the work you've done, I'd like to give you some just closing remarks time to talk about what it means to have this day in honor of your daughter.
Thank you. Yeah. So for those of you who don't know, the whole family got what was likely COVID back in March of 2020, back before testing. So I say likely it was COVID, but we don't know for sure. We were all very sick, and this was the first time she had been to the hospital in like 9 years. And she didn't survive. So she died on the COVID floor on a ventilator. But it was pretty tragic. And it can be kind of hard to talk about. It's just like you said, how I look at it as, you know, her life was an honor, and it's being remembered here in Colorado by our governor. Like you said, Governor Polis declares this, and we celebrate every year. We go to the Capitol, they read the proclamation. It's Charlotte Figi Day. And how cool is that? And I try to remember, I can remember her every day, every hour. I use that day to remember how many years I got with her. She was 13 when she died, and she was 4 when she started this. And I really didn't know her for those first 4 years. She wasn't I got to meet her. I got to live with her. We got to get to know her personality. And, so I celebrate all that time that I had with her, and I do this work that I do. I don't have to do this anymore. She isn't here to benefit from it, but I really didn't start the CBD, you know, start down this road for Charlotte anyway. And so it's still, these people who are using this still deserve people to stand up for them. So it's a huge honor to have the state of Colorado and people care about Charlotte Figi Day. I always say, you know, a lot of people think that they don't matter, or you think your vote doesn't matter, or you think your life, like, who am I? I'm not smart enough, or I'm not this enough, or I was born with these circumstances. And I say, look at this kid, special needs kid. And she had this impact on the world. And we all matter, and we can all go forward and do great things. And so there's no excuses, right? Like if a small special needs kid can accomplish these things in this world, we all have no excuse not to go forward and do great things.
Absolutely beautiful remarks. Thank you for sharing. Paige Figi, you are just an absolute pioneer and trailblazer for us all. And thank you for sharing your story, your daughter's remarkable life story, and the impact that you and your entire family have had on us all. I want to obviously use this time to also honor Charlotte's siblings, her brother, her twin sister, her father, and all of her loved ones. Paige, this has just been an absolute beautiful episode, and I look forward to supporting you. I've done political action to support access to fruits and vegetables in school meals, and when I evaluate what you're doing, I view it as something that definitely pulls at my heartstrings and moves my soul. So I look forward to supporting you and your work, your very noble work with the Coalition for Access Now. So I want to remind folks that that web address is coalitionforaccess.org. Certainly the documentary that aired on CNN, the first installment of that documentary with Dr. Sanjay Gupta, you can learn more about the Figi family, Paige and Charlotte. And we wish you the best. We're big fans here of all that you do at the Produce Moms, and we look forward to supporting all your great work. So
thanks for having me. Thank you so much. And thanks for thinking of my daughter and helping support this. I think it's meaningful and worthwhile. So it's just nice to have that backing from such an awesome company and an awesome person. It's been really great to get to know you.
Likewise. With that, folks, thank you very much for tuning in. What a beautiful episode this has been, so meaningful. Join us as we all celebrate Charlotte Figi Day and honor an amazing mother, Paige Figi. Don't forget to subscribe to the Produce Moms podcast on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, and any preferred podcast platform. Check out the Produce Moms on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, and YouTube. Special thanks to everyone involved with the Produce Moms podcast, my amazing team. Stay tuned till next time. The Produce Moms Photography Studio is now open. Our photographer, Jan, has been taking beautiful photos for theproducemoms.com for nearly a decade. And now we are opening up our Indianapolis-based photography studio to help other brands with their food photography. The Produce Moms Photography Studio is trusted by some of the biggest brands in fruits and vegetables. We're your solution for seasonal, lifestyle, and packaging photography. Our photos have been used for national retailer ads, e-commerce technology, print, digital, social media, and more. To learn more or to schedule your photo shoot with us, email me, Lori@theproducemoms.com.